The wind in Montana did not howl that night. It hunted. It came screaming down from the mountains like a living thing, tearing across the high plains and swallowing the world in white. The year was 1882, and winter had already been cruel. But this storm was something else. This was the kind of blizzard that erased roads, swallowed cattle, and left men frozen where they stood. Luke Callahan rode straight into it. Snow lashed his face like shards of glass. Ice crusted in his beard. His heavy wool coat and canvas jacket did little against the bitter cold that cut through bone and memory alike. He was a man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered and hard-built from years of ranch work, but even he felt small under that white sky. He had spent hours searching for his herd near a narrow creek bend where they should have been sheltering. Yet what he found were huddled shapes coated in ice. 3 calves stood frozen solid, as if they were still waiting for help. A yearling lay buried beneath a drift. The rest of the herd trembled, backs to the wind, fighting to live. There was nothing he could do but throw down the last of his feed and turn for home. Luke trusted his horse more than his own eyes. Bess pushed forward through the blinding snow, following the faint memory of the creek that would lead back to his cabin, tucked deep in the foothills north of Bozeman. He was thinking of fire, of thick black coffee, of walls that kept the storm out. Then Bess stopped. She snorted hard, ears pinned back, refusing to move. Luke squinted through the white fury. At first, he saw nothing. Then he saw it, a dark shape that did not belong. He slid from the saddle, the snow swallowing his legs to the knee. His hand rested on the revolver at his hip as he stepped closer. It was a carriage, a fine dark blue one, the kind that belonged in town, not on a ranch trail. It lay splintered and overturned like a crushed insect. One wheel shattered. A trunk had burst open, spilling frozen silks that whipped helplessly in the wind. A horse lay dead nearby, legs stiff toward the sky. Then Luke saw something else. Drag marks. Faint. Almost gone. Someone had crawled away from the wreck. His heart began to pound in his chest as he followed the marks 20 yards into the drifting snow. The wind tried to erase them even as he walked. He found her half buried in a snowbank. She was face down, her dark hair frozen stiff against her cheek. Luke rolled her over, and his breath caught in his throat. She was young, no more than 25. Her skin was pale blue, her lips cracked from cold. Ice clung to her lashes. She wore fine dark wool, torn open from the crash. Lace showed beneath it. Clothing meant for drawing rooms, not blizzards. He ripped off his mitten and pressed his rough fingers to her neck. At first, he felt nothing. Then, a faint flutter, a heartbeat. Luke did not think. He acted. He tore off his own heavy coat and wrapped it around her frozen body. Lifting her was like lifting a doll made of ice. He carried her back through the screaming wind and fought to get her onto Bess. It took strength he did not know he had left. He climbed behind her and pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms tight around her small frame. Her cold seeped into him like death itself. The ride back to the cabin felt endless, but by the time he kicked open his door and dragged her inside, he could barely feel his own hands. He laid her before the hearth and worked fast. Fire first. That was survival. He struck a match with fingers that barely bent and fed kindling until the flames roared. Only then did he turn back to her. Her fingers were white and stiff, her boots frozen, solid. He cut them off carefully. Silk stockings followed. He hesitated only a moment before cutting away the rest of her frozen clothes. cold would kill her faster than shame. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned and forced a few drops of whiskey between her lips. She coughed weakly, but swallowed. "Fight," he muttered under his breath. "You fight now." Hours passed while the storm battered his cabin like a living enemy, while he rubbed her hands and feet slowly to bring life back into them. The fire roared. The small room grew warm. Near dusk, her eyelids fluttered. She woke with a sharp gasp, eyes wide with animal panic. "Easy," Luke said, holding up both hands. "You're safe." Her gaze darted around the rough log cabin. Fear filled her eyes when they landed on him. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My cabin. I found you near a wrecked carriage." "My carriage." Her voice trembled. "The men. Were there men?" "Just you and a dead horse," he answered. She shrank back under the blankets. "I cannot pay you." Luke frowned. "Ain't asking for pay. Drink this." He handed her a tin cup of hot broth. She hesitated before taking it. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. There was a long pause. "Anna," she said. Luke knew a lie when he heard one, but he did not press. Outside, the storm raged for 3 more days. Inside, something else began to build. The blizzard did not ease. It trapped them. For 3 long days, the world outside Luke Callahan's cabin vanished under white fury. Snow buried the door nearly to the roof. The wind screamed down the valley like something alive and angry. No one could come in. No one could leave. They were alone. On the first morning after she woke, Luke found her sitting upright on his bunk, wrapped in his wool blankets, watching him with sharp, careful eyes. The fear was still there, but it was quieter now. Calculating. "Morning," he muttered, moving straight to the hearth. Routine kept a man steady. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice had changed. It was clear now. Refined. The voice of someone raised far from rough cabins and cattle trails. He poured the last of the coffee and handed her a cup. She took it carefully. Even in frostbitten fingers, she held it like fine porcelain. "I told you my name is Anna," she said slowly, "but that is not the truth." Luke did not turn around. Didn't figure it was. "My name is Victoria." It suited her. Strong. Clean. He nodded once. "Victoria, you're safe here." She watched him closely. "For how long?" "As long as this storm keeps the world buried." Silence stretched between them. It was not comfortable, but it was honest. On the second day, the wind died down enough for Luke to check the animals. He returned covered in ice and frost. She had added wood to the fire. She moved stiffly, but she moved. "You're a long way from town," he said that evening. "And I was on my way to Bozeman," she answered. "Alone?" She hesitated. "I had a driver and a guard." "What happened?" Her hands tightened around her tin cup. "We were ambushed." Luke's jaw hardened. 3 men, she continued quietly. "They shot the driver first, then my guard. The carriage went off the road. I ran into the storm." He said nothing. He understood running. "They wanted something from you," he said finally. "Yes." "What?" She looked at him, and in that moment he saw not a frightened woman, but someone cornered. "My father's ranch." The fire cracked loudly between them. "My father died 2 months ago. He left everything to me." Luke glanced up. A woman inheriting land in Montana was rare, dangerous. "There was a foreman," she continued. "A man named Silas Morgan. He believes the ranch belongs to him, and he claims my father promised it to him. When I refused to sign it over, things changed." Luke felt something cold settle in his gut. I was going to the territorial marshal in Bozeman to file the will properly. Morgan knew. He sent men to stop me." "The ranch got a name?" Luke asked. She hesitated. "Langley." The word hung heavy in the cabin. Everyone in Montana knew the Langley Ranch. It was the largest spread in the territory. Thousands of cattle. Water rights that controlled whole valleys. Power. Luke stared at the fire. So the woman he had dragged from a snowbank was not just any stranger. She was Victoria Langley. The storm finally broke on the third morning. Silence replaced the howling wind. The sky was sharp blue. Snow drifted higher than the cabin windows. Luke stepped outside to dig a path, and that was when he heard the howls. Wolves. They circled the shed by dusk, bold and hungry. Luke grabbed his rifle. "Stay inside," he ordered. "You're injured," she argued. "I lose that mule. We're trapped." He stepped into the blue frozen world. Gunfire cracked through the valley. Snarls and a human grunt echoed back. Victoria pressed her hands to the window, heart pounding. Then a heavy knock struck the door. She tore the bar away, and Luke fell inside, blood staining his sleeve. "A bite," he muttered through clenched teeth. She did not panic. She poured whiskey straight into the torn flesh of his arm. He hissed but did not move. She stitched him by firelight, her hands steady, face pale with focus. When she finished, their eyes met. The air changed. Neither of them spoke of it. The next day, Luke rode to scout the ridge. Well, he saw riders in the pass. 6 men. He waited until they rested, then slid down to retrieve something that had fallen from one saddlebag. A leather tag, stamped deep into it. Morgan. Luke raced back to the cabin. "They're coming," he said, slamming the door shut. Victoria's face went white. "How many?" 6. Her breathing quickened. He threw the leather tag on the table. "I need the truth. Who are you really?" She swallowed hard. "My name is Victoria Elizabeth Langley." Silence filled the room. "They killed my driver. They will kill you. They will kill anyone who stands with me." Luke moved to the window and began barricading it with planks. "We're not running," he said. Her eyes widened. "There are 6 of them." "So are their walls." He handed her his second rifle. "You know how to shoot?" "My father taught me." "Good. Load." They waited as the sun sank. Hoofbeats crunched in the snow. A voice called out, "Miss Langley, we know you're in there." Luke did not answer. "Send the girl out, Callahan," Morgan shouted. "This ain't your fight." "She's not coming out," Luke replied calmly. Gunfire exploded. Luke dropped one man before he reached the shed. Another fell at the door. Bullets hammered the logs. Victoria pressed low to the floor, loading as he fired. Smoke filled the cabin. Morgan's voice roared in anger. "This ain't over." The riders finally retreated into the deep snow, dragging their wounded. Silence returned. Victoria stared at Luke. "You killed them," she whispered. "They came to kill you," he answered. He slumped suddenly. His arm was bleeding again. But she rushed to him, fury and fear mixing in her chest. "You do not get to die," she said through clenched teeth. She stitched him again. When she finished, their faces were inches apart. He brushed soot from her cheek. She closed her eyes. The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was desperate. Raw. Born from gunfire and blood, and the knowledge that tomorrow might never come. They broke apart, breathless. And outside, the snow glowed under the cold moonlight. Morgan would be back, and next time, he would not retreat. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. Dawn came like judgment. The snow outside the cabin glowed pale blue under a cold sky, and the silence felt heavier than the storm ever had. Two dark shapes lay frozen in the drifts where Morgan's men had fallen. The valley looked peaceful. It was not. Luke had not slept. His wolf-bitten arm burned with fever. His shoulder throbbed from the fight, but he stood at the window, watching the pass. "They'll be back," he said quietly. Victoria stood behind him, wrapped in wool, her face pale but steady. "Then we don't wait for them." He turned slowly. "What are you thinking? My ranch is stronger than this cabin. Thicker walls, more supplies. If we stay here, we starve." Luke studied her. "You understand what that means?" he asked. "Morgan will expect you to hide, not return." She lifted her chin. "It's my land." They moved fast. Luke packed ammunition and what little food remained. Victoria salvaged her trunk from the wrecked carriage, while together they buried the dead in snow and stone. Then they rode. The journey to the Langley ranch was brutal. Snow came to the horse's chest. Wind sliced through every layer of clothing. Luke's fever worsened, but he stayed upright. Victoria rode pressed against his back, arms wrapped around his waist. She could feel the heat of sickness in him. She did not let go. When they reached the rise overlooking the ranch, the sun was bleeding red into the horizon. The Langley house stood tall, 2 stories of log and stone. Smoke rose from its chimney. "They're inside," Luke said. He hid the horses in the aspens and led her to a small hunter's shed near the property. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'll scout." He disappeared into the dusk like a ghost. Victoria waited in the dark, heart pounding. Minutes felt like hours, and then she heard something. Her name. Not softly, not kindly. "Miss Langley!" Morgan's voice boomed across the yard. "Come home." She froze.